G'day, legends. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and you've had a fantastic weekend. You're looking after yourselves and you've had some time to yourself and with your family too. Now, today we have a little bit to go over, but I'm hoping to keep it shorter, but more doctrinal about what we are seeing up in Kharkiv. We're going to look at attritional warfare doctrine, what is happening, what the reports are, and we'll speak about all of that. We need to talk about conventional weapons and nuclear weapons and strikes promised from foreign ministers as well. So we'll look at that. And we need to talk about something I may have got wrong yesterday and some satellite imagery about aircraft. That'll probably be at the end after we do Kharkiv, then look at other areas on the maps and then that, as well as claims of another Su-25 being taken down. Now, where we're going to focus the majority of our attention today is up in the north of Ukraine, northeast, up in the Kharkiv Oblast, Kharkiv region. And a lot of eyes are up in this direction today because an epicenter, a shopping center, has been hit by several FABs. These are the guided glide bombs coming in and have struck an epicenter, shopping center. Now, it is very hard to get an idea on casualty figures from this at the moment. What I'm seeing coming out is significantly lower than what you'd expect of a shopping center getting hit. I'm hearing 4 to 8 killed and 35 wounded, but I don't know. I guess over the next coming days, it'll give us a better idea of that. I can't show some of the footage that'll be on the Telegram if you'd like, but I will show just this of the massive burning up of this center here. Now, as we see with any strike, regardless, there's always justification given by people, but it's always very foggy around any strikes like this. People will say military equipment was here. People say this is pure terrorism, blah, blah, blah. I'm not there to say exactly what was here or was not here, but we will look at what has happened here. And strikes should be avoided within civilian areas, as well as any military equipment within civilian areas needs to be limited as well. Far too many civilians are being killed in modern warfare, regardless if it is in Israel, Gaza, Ukraine, Russia, or any other wars anywhere around. So the civilians caught up in this, it is a horrible, horrible, bloody thing. Now, let's talk about Kharkiv and the movements here. Now, we'll talk about what actually happened. So about 2 weeks ago, we have seen this cross over here into Vovchansk as well as into Lipsy here, these two front lines. Now, for this map, just take it as what we are seeing by this map. It's not going to matter too much because we do know there are some differences between maps, but that's not going to matter too much today. But that Russia basically walked across a lot of defensive works in here, and we have seen that now an investigation has been launched into this towards the 125th Brigade and its subordinate units of a lack of preparedness and improper organisation. Now, this is a criminal investigation. We don't know what will happen to those who are found guilty of this, if they are found guilty. But we have speculated before that it can't just be, oh, yeah, you've done some corruption with money. No. People, equipment, and bloody strategy has been killed because of your actions here. As they say, by negligence, corruption, it was a failure, it was a betrayal. That they did not properly organise defence positions on the border of the Kharkiv Oblast due to a careless attitude to military service, that they were abandoned. Now, you cannot blame any of the soldiers in the trenches if they were given stuff that was not prepared correctly for abandoning that position to somewhere more favourable. Look into 30 commanders from the 125th and other units. So I hope something comes of that and people are bloody have to answer for exactly what has happened here, because, yeah, people will downplay this, but it was a 10-kilometre advance in a couple of days in somewhere that should have been heavily defended. Now, we're going to talk about attritional warfare and maybe what is happening up here. So lots of reporting that Ukraine is preparing a counterattack in Vovchansk as well as in Lipsy here. So Vovchansk is the main area we talk about. We have seen that Ukrainian forces have deployed a lot back over to the north side of the Vovcha River here to try and stop the Russian advance, but also push that back, as well as reports down in Lipsy here. Now, one thing we do need to say is a lot of bridges have been taken out in this area that will have a problem on logistical supply here too. We saw that in the early days. And in this particular region, given how close it is to the border and what's going on here, Russia does have overmatch with its FAB glided bombs and other systems. And what people are saying is, could this be playing into the hands of the Russian forces in this area? And we will talk about military doctrine, attritional war doctrine, and all of that in a second. So Zelensky has claimed in this area that the breakthrough towards Kharkiv, which happened a little over 2 weeks ago, resulted in military casualties of 1 to 8, 1 Ukrainian to 8 Russians. According to the president of this week, there's been about 2,000 to 3,000 casualties among the occupiers. So you still need to say, let's take these numbers as what they are on face value. You're still talking about hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in this area. That said, we have no idea to back up these numbers, similarly to this number here that people are celebrating today, which I think celebration of any amount of humans like this is just bloody horrible. But 500,000 Russian personnel killed is the claim. We look at the BBC working with Media Zone, looking at obituaries, Facebook posts, all of this, that they confirm about 50,000. So it's about 10 times the amount claimed. Now, I'm not saying one number is wrong or the other way, but it would be interesting in modern times that only 1 in 10 have a Facebook post or obituary or blah, blah, blah. What would be interesting to see how many MIA there are as well. So look, this is just, it's in the informational space as well. And, you know, that is important in this war. But again, those are the claims, but how is it actually looking in here? And remember that my experts were warning that Ukraine is too fixated on optics and it needs to sometimes trade land for time. And could this push back into these areas be playing into the hand of what Russia actually want? And I've speculated previously in this exact area in the first days, and still I'll hold this, that it does seem like a large reconnaissance force. It doesn't seem like a full conventional military push into here. Just from the amount of Ukrainian footage coming out of tanks being hit, from armoured vehicles being hit, and just soldiers in general, it doesn't seem like it was a massive push in here. It seems the majority of this was done by smaller elements and with support of massive amounts of fires. So artillery, FABs, everything coming across, and that bubble of influence, which we'll speak about, is so important in attritional warfare from EW and other supporting elements. Now, given this may be a smaller reconnaissance force like that, if it was larger, we would just see footage coming out from Ukrainian drone operators much, much larger, like we've seen in previous months in the war. What could happen is Russia could withdraw from this area as fast as they pushed in, or hold position. And regardless, we'll talk about what actually happens here. Now, down in Lipsy here as well, we get this from a Ukrainian page today. We're holding on. We won't give up. Liat Assault Brigade is here. The Ukrainian Armed Forces are here. We're holding on and won't let our land be beaten. But let's look at the attritional warfare doctrine, some things I've been sent across from people that are experts in this field, and talk about, is this the right tactic somewhere like this? So this is initially one of the things I was sent across, that Ukraine should be falling back and inflicting what casualties they can on the way. There's no easy strategic prize at the end of the line of advance for Russia. That in these areas, yes, they may have some high ground, but down in Lipsy, it's going to go into low ground, and you're going to have bloody defensive works, all this. You're going to eventually come out of your bubble of influence of safety and protection of planes that are over the Russian sky here. It's going to get harder and harder as it pushes in, especially on logistics. I think the problem for Ukraine is they put so much stock in optics. They're so narrative driven that it absolutely skews their military decisions towards absurdity. Because of this box they've created for themselves, they feel they have to block all progress all the time. But they have neither the manpower nor equipment for such tactics. They should be trading territory for time, especially territory like this. This is speaking exactly in this region. Burning men and machines means you have less time. So should be fighting withdrawal, doing the hurt on Russia as you can, but because of the optics here, he's saying, because it's so seen that we can't trade any time for this, because of the interactive maps we have and informational space, that it has to then push back on this. But because Ukraine's strategy is absurd, they have some of their best units pouring into unfortified positions to fight the Russians out in the open, because of the optics of giving that meaningless ground up are too much for them to withstand. And this is exactly like people will say happened in Avdiivka, as well as Chasiv Yar currently, that you're pouring in these better units into unprepared areas to fight because it hasn't worked straight off, but you're putting in really good guys. And there are reports that there are troops coming off other areas to backfill what has happened in here. And the mistakes in here haven't started now. They started months ago with the development being bloody, I don't know what stage it got to, of the defensive works in here. There's probably nothing as valuable to Russia from a strategic standpoint right now than getting to fight these reserves in a relatively open areas because of the fire's advantage in here, that trading time for optics as well. Now, this is some doctrine here. The fastest way to lose a war of attrition is to focus on maneuver, expending valuable resources on near-term territorial objectives. Recognizing that wars of attrition have their own art is vital to winning them without sustaining crippling losses. And I think this is something that Ukrainian command need to do, is accept that this is an attritional war. We have seen everyone not want to use that war. This is not attritional, blah, blah, blah. I think we need to look at, since the end of 22 till now, a long time, we have not seen any massive success in maneuver warfare. What have been the most successful elements of getting ground or moving on the battlefield since the end of 22? And all wars eventually become maneuver. Things like FABs, things like Ukrainian drones. But these are feeding into that attritional aspect of war and actually reduce the effectiveness of maneuver warfare on the ground. But this is the doctrine that ties in with what my friend said. Now, this is from another friend of mine. They'll attempt, talking about the Russians, as they will attempt to surround Kharkiv or make it seem that way, but the majority of attacks will be by air, artillery and missile. The position of actual fighting itself won't change that much. Their intention, Russia, is to take Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, areas in areas in the east that they were in 2014, and they'll play the same games as they have been since day one. Up and down the border where Ukraine has made the same mistake over and over again, stay in the same center to hold and allow themselves to be surrounded. Mariupol, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, Bakhmut, Avdiivka. And could this be similar of what we are then seeing? And in these areas, we saw that surrounding of areas to not want to withdraw and maintain the optics of what is happening. That your military doctrine can't go into making the Twitter space happy. Remember Kyiv. I'm absolutely of the belief that Russia had zero intention to take Kyiv. At a push, surround it. To take it would have taken up way too many resources. What they did do was keep Ukrainian resources around the city. Russia's primary goal was to take down in the south for the bridgehead and hold resources there. We haven't seen Russia pour the resources into this area that it would take anywhere near to take somewhere like Kharkiv. Don't play into their hand. Now, this is more doctrine as well here. Early stages of attritional war range from the initiation of hostilities to the point where mobilized resources are available in large numbers and are ready for combat operations. That said, you've got that initial phase, and then you need to mobilize resources, whatever, before you start those operations. During this period, major offensive operations should be avoided. Even if large attacks are successful, they will result in significant casualties, often for meaningless territorial gains. The goal is to force the enemy to expend vital material and strategic reserves on strategically meaningless operations. So you want to force the enemy, whoever your enemy is, whichever side you're on, but to force them to putting material and reserves to meaningless operations. And people are saying some of these areas to push back through here, what change is it actually going to have in some areas to not fall out? Is it down to those optics that is making it meaningful, or is it strategically meaningful? And I'm saying this because you are smart, you're intelligent, and you can make up your own mind on what we are seeing on the ground, and are mistakes then being made. Now, these are what you need on the first stages doctrinally to launch and be successful in attritional war. The first phase range from the initiation of hostility to the point where sufficient combat power has been mobilized to allow decisive action. Now, the first phase, the initiation of hostilities, it is very clear that you're going to have massive losses in this, and then you're going to take, they say, by doctrine, 1.5 to 2 years to actually rebuild your force to then have anything. Now, in this, you'll see little positional shifting. This is after the initiation on the ground. focusing on favorable exchange of losses and building up combat power in the rear. So exchange of ground for losses, time for how it's looking, and then go on from there. The dominant form of combat is fires rather than maneuver. And this is what we've seen for a long time, is focus on artillery, fabs, all of this, complemented by extensive fortifications and camouflage, which we have seen Russia massively fortify not only Ukrainian territory, but their own territory as well. Now, the second phase can commence after one side has met the following conditions. Now, I will say that we are looking at a Russian offensive. This, as to take Zelensky's word, has said this could be the first of several. Initially, Budanov and Zelensky have stated that they did think it was going to come in mid-June, and it came early May. So we are still expecting more to come. The amount of forces we have seen enter areas up in the north is not the amount that we would have thought. So we do expect more to come. But as I read out these conditions, think of, has Russia met them, or has Ukraine met them to then have a initiation of hostilities and combat power there. So second phase can commence. Newly mobilized forces have completed their training. The enemy's strategic reserve is exhausted. Fires and reconnaissance superiority are achieved. The enemy's industrial capacity is degraded. Now, you can point to examples in this, but if we were to take these four and give it to an alien and say which side has completed these more so right now, it would be Russia. They have had very little movement on the ground and build up of then these the fortifications. They've mobilized a while ago a lot of forces that, due to artificial exhaustion, Ukraine's strategic weapon systems have been depleted down. I know they're getting backfilled by the US, but that's not filling very quickly, nor is the Czech artillery initiative either. So right now that has been artificially deflated, as well as mobilization. We know Ukraine has only really just signed in that, and it's going to take many months for that to really come into effect. In an area like this, Russia does have superiority of fire control, and the enemy's industrial sector is degraded. Now, this doesn't mean that the West's industrial sector is degraded. I think we've degraded that ourselves since the end of the Cold War. But Ukraine's industrial sector is completely reliant on the West and the support coming in there. Now, is Russia's industrial sector degraded? Yeah, it is as well. But who ticks more of these boxes before you can start it? Russia ticks these at the moment. And the problem is, with an attritional war, I think in the 2023 counteroffensive, we failed to recognize that this is now an attritional war and that these weren't met before the launch of that. And like the Italian defense minister, one of them, has said that he warned because of the reasons like this, it would be a failure, and of what we saw could have actually had a net negative effect on the overall outcome of the war. Now, the second phase begins after those met. The offensive should launch across a broad front. Seek to overwhelm the enemy at multiple points using shallow attacks. Multiple points, shallow attacks. We may see Sumy open up as well. The intent is to remain inside the layered bubble of friendly protective systems while stretching depleted enemy reserves until the front line collapses. So the electronic warfare, the fab range, the artillery range, all of this. Look, we're probably looking at, with EW, maximum of, say, 10Ks. This is why in here, even if given the opportunity, Russia shouldn't have gone beyond that. They would have got absolutely cut off and bloody wiped out. But this electronic warfare bubble of influence of everything here, this is the reason why maneuver warfare will be unsuccessful currently if you're going to do some sort of thunder run, whatever, way back behind the line. Because it worked against guys in sandals does not mean it will work in a modern war. Now, there is a cascading effect in which one crisis in one sector forces defenders to shift reserves from another sector. Exactly what we think Russia was trying to do to Ukraine here, only to generate a crisis there in turn. As forces start falling back and leaving prepared fortifications, morale plummets. And the question of, if we leave the mega fortress, how can this hold? So what they're basically saying here is, if forces have to be pulled off an area down here and put into here, that here can create then a crisis. And does Ukraine have the operational reserves to backfill these areas? And if Sumy opened up, and if something opened up from Belarus, I don't know. Do they have the operational reserves to do that? it is currently unknown. It's looking like what's happened up here hasn't had too much effect down in the east yet, but we will see. But the reason I just want to show this is I believe you're smart, you're good critical thinkers. Have a look at the doctrine presented. This is the doctrine of attritional war. Have a look at what we are seeing on the front line and look at then what experts in the field are telling me as well about mistakes being made here. And I believe a lot of it then lines up. And this isn't bashing anything. It's taking a realistic view of what could be happening here, and could it be better to trade time for ground or ground for time. So it's just interesting to look at that there as well. Now, let's do maps. Sorry, I know I always get this bloody wrong. We do see a couple of changes on the map today. So we're up in the north. Of course, this is Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv. Red area is occupied 22, purple since 14. Green area, Russia has been over 2 weeks and they've been pushed back or has withdrawn. Blue, new Ukrainian territory within then 2 weeks. Now, come down Kupiansk region, and we do see this large movement out of Kislivka towards Ivanivka. Now, Ivanivka, I believe yesterday, Suryak has said that Russia did move in here and confirmed that it had been then occupied. Deep State Map has then updated this today with the majority of it then occupied, and we have a Noel Reports map here as well. Now, Noel Reports map, let's just have a look. Here, look at where these roads then converge. This is the convergence here. He's showing that there is far more Russian territory gained here than this map is showing. Same with then up to the north here as well. But we do know from multiple maps, we can 100% confirm there has been a shift here from Suryak, Noel, Deep State, bang, we know this happened, and we have footage here as well that no geolocation, but said to be Russian forces within Ivanivka then itself. This doesn't give us too much of an idea of who these forces may be by looking at equipment and whatever here. We don't know whether better or worse. It's one of the ways to tell which units somewhere is look at if they're running things like suppressors, night fighting capabilities, multicams, things like this. It's not a surefire way, but you know, it gives you a better idea of what may then be happening. Now we come down, we don't see any changes through the Seversk front. We don't see any change in and around Bakhmut, which is interesting because we do think there has been some changes in here. Not much or to the north of Avdiivka, but then a lot to the west of Avdiivka. Now let's measure this here, 3.6 kilometers, so 2 and a bit miles. This has not happened in a day. We know for a fact Russia did not move this far in a day. What we do know is this map is to the point of maybe 2 weeks, was 2 weeks behind this area. We had 2 weeks ago when I made the video about what I would see happening here, that there was geolocated footage in and around here near the Derna River. Now, this is doing what I originally said, what I believe will happen here when we look at what Russia has done before of enveloping things. That this move, let's have a look if this will load over the past week or so. Look, I said that we will see a movement from Ulmansk down to here, not to try and push in here because it would be a massive kill zone, but a push from Neteljove to try and get to Karlivka, and we do know then an envelopment and potentially in this way as well to close up this territory here. Now, let's then look at, since I made that, towards what we are then seeing. We see push out from Neteljove and then up to today. Then we see then to Ulmansky here as well. Not trying to get caught out in this. And this is what we need to focus on. I think should have probably put that with that doctrine at the beginning. You can't rely on your enemy making mistakes to take opportunity there. Maybe in the beginning, we saw Russia make so many mistakes, but they have learned, they've got better. Their tactics, strategy, equipment, and weapons are better than the beginning. You can't focus on that. You need to look at what has happened before. And like the guy told me the other day, that they keep letting it happen of this surround envelopment in here. And that's what, in response to the other video, what I said would likely happen in that area. Now, I don't want to be right when military advancements happen, but I think it was quite obvious. Now, let's have a look at some other areas. We'll come down into Krasnohivka up here. Now, no change shown onto this map. Let's have a look on the Noel reports here. Now, he's showing some closing up, but no more than this map. See this roundabout? This is said roundabout just in here. So it's actually showing less than the official map here, and of course less than something like Syriac will show us as well, but he gave that update today. Now, don't see any changes down here through the south. We don't see a botany change at all. I think we will see that at some point. Remember, like I've said, I think this plays in the informational space of dripping things in. No change down on this Krinky area, but we do have some from Syriac here. So let's have a look here. That he does show some blue down on this area just down from where Krinky is. Now, this is difficult to line up, but see where it turns out near Kozachileri here, that right on the outskirts here, that this is actually showing in his map as blue. So that is very interesting that this hasn't updated. Maybe then it will. Now, let's have a look at what he says here. Now, there is geolocated footage of a flag going up here. I, for some reason, didn't upload it. But situation on Kherson front. Over the past 3 weeks, Ukrainian army has gradually moved from the village of Krinky to the neighbouring neighbourhood of Kozachileri. With the start of a new operation, Ukrainian forces completely abandoned Krinky and moved north and southwest. However, it cannot be said that the locality has been recaptured by the Russian army. The village is destroyed and it is impossible to consolidate there. The photographs we've seen, it is just completely flattened for bloody years. It has just been hit by artillery, by everything, one way or the other. So it's incredibly destroyed and you couldn't have something there. The easy entry of Ukrainian troops into Kozachileri is due to the lack of presence of Russian personnel there. In fact, it is a reality that along the bank of the Dnieper, there is no real Russian presence, which is to be found in the defence located a few kilometres inland. And you wouldn't have your defences right on the border here. You'll have it a little bit in from that, because otherwise, well, it's pretty obvious you're going to get absolutely then smashed. Now, remember, the defensive works here. This isn't absolutely everything, but we can see where some of these are lying back as well, and in areas of which Ukraine will have taken up some as well. But I believe in here, this is maybe defensive works build up. It's not just going to show smaller platoon size level elements where they've maybe made a position in here too. But you can see that they are back off the front. Same as anywhere, same as like up in Kharkiv. You don't want them directly on it. You want them back a little bit. That it may be a fairly grey zone, and maybe this is why it's shown as grey zone on the Ukrainian map as well. But this extends from Syriac. It's hard to understand that Ukrainian insistence on holding the southern bridgehead, barely managing to take what might be considered vital strategic objectives while losing troops to Russian artillery and drones, operating quietly from the rear. Despite some experts claiming that there are still hordes of soldiers assaulting Stalingrad-style positions, nor does the goal of forcing diversion of Ukrainian reinforcements to this front make sense, as it is precisely Ukraine that is now forced to reinforce Kharkiv and the Donbass because of dwindling troop reserves. So is it forcing Russia to redeploy people in here? No, but the deployment of troops across while other areas need it. But if Ukraine was to leave this, to regain that would be incredibly costly. The problem with this is you have to cross, to have a larger assault bridgehead here, more so than artillery range, you are going to have to cross equipment. You're going to have to cross armour. You're going to have to cross eventually artillery systems, because even if the arty system gets right on here, it's only going to be reaching out in this. You need to eventually step it across to then the left bank. And that is going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult to do. More easy if you've still got troops here, but what we've seen is deployment of soldiers and maybe some vehicles, but heavy armor and whatever. There's so much reconnaissance and ISR capability up and down the Dnieper across either way at this point in the war, from Russia to the right bank, Ukraine to the left bank, of an element large enough to have real effect, I think is very, very limited. And that's similar then to what I believe Syriac is saying that. But I think holding this is very, very important for Ukraine as well, to have some element on that bank. Otherwise, you've got nothing up until zap. Now, let's have a look at some aircraft, some claims as well, and then we'll talk a little bit about nukes. Now, this is something that I got wrong yesterday. Apologise for that. Now, this is a Su-34. We showed this and showed it looks like there was some damage. Now, we do see that then from Brady Afric, he does say that these is a real Russian aircraft and that there are decoy wings on this. And on looking at this, you can see that the fuselage here definitely is sitting above where the wings look like painted on this as well. So yeah, we spoke about that maybe a aircraft then damage taken out there, Su-34. Now, look, I believe that I was actually wrong on this. This does really clear up a lot there. So Russia added a new decoy aircraft to this airbase, raised fuselage with white wings, while the wings are flat and cast no shadows. Ukrainian drones have targeted the site multiple times in recent months. So yes, there was definitely some damage at this airbase, but what we are looking at here believed to be a decoy on the airfield. And maybe that fuselage would be enough to trick an AI drone here too. Now, Ukraine Defense has claimed then another Su-25, bringing either to 7 or 8 in the last 20 days for the 110th Mech Brigade, but seen no evidence of this. Again, we see evidence of high-level S-400 incredibly embarrassing systems get taken out, from photographs of soldiers, Russian guys on the ground, to all this imagery, whatever, and we haven't seen any of these of an older aircraft. Why not? And even Ukrainian pages are then asking this. Another claim, Su-25. I'm weary about these claims at the moment, since no visual confirmation has been given. Servicemen from the 110th claim another Su-25. So, yeah, there's so much claims being made, but no visual confirmation has been given of any of these yet. And it's bringing back bloody flashbacks to the Su-34s and how that went here as well. So, look, like I say with everything, if it doesn't come in 24, 48, 72 hours, probably maximum 48, it's difficult to believe whether that it is someone taking a shit in the woods to a plane being taken down. Everyone has an eye. We got footage way out bloody here somewhere of a Russian strategic bomber coming down, you know. These are low, fast aircraft flying right on the front line. It'll be, if one goes down, if 8 have gone down, I guarantee there must be footage of one. Now, we speak a little bit yesterday about nukes and whatever. We speak about this more, and I want to do a bigger breakdown on how I actually see this, and that will just be a standalone video. I'm going to start doing some standalone videos just of specific topics, but they'll be shorter. More broadly, arguing, declared our own red line is only, from the Polish foreign minister, invites Moscow to tailor its hostile actions to our constantly changing self-imposed limitations. So we say this is what our red line is, then Moscow can push up to that. He was skeptical about Russian threats to use nuclear weapons, saying, the Americans have told the Russians that if you explode a nuke, even if it doesn't kill anybody, we will hit all your targets in Ukraine with conventional weapons, we'll destroy all of them. And I think it's a credible threat. Also, the Chinese and Indians have read Russia the Riot Act. It's no child's play because of that taboo were also to be breached, like the taboo of not changing borders by force. China knows that Japan and Korea would go nuclear. Presumably, they don't want that. Now, let's speak about this. John Mearsheimer is a really good one, whether you agree or disagree with him, but to listen to about nuclear weapons, how this would go. That what happens if Russia were to use a nuclear bomb somewhere? Now, we're not saying Kyiv. What if just some open territory somewhere exploded a small yield nuke? What would the reaction actually be? Now, that we will destroy all your targets with conventional weapons will hit. That instantly opens up war to wider. And what people have asked is the US, is NATO prepared for a wider war across borders? Russian strikes into NATO, NATO strikes into Russia, and everything goes to shit. Are they prepared to do that for the sake of what has happened in Ukraine with a system like this? He believes, John Mearsheimer says no. Now, I don't know how this would go, but I lean similar to what he's saying, that I don't think we are prepared to start an exchange on that level if that happened. It depends on what the fallout, I guess, would actually be. But we have speculated before. What happens if Russia does blow up a nuclear weapon to, I guess, prove that they are serious? What happens then to support? How do people see this? It would change everything drastically because of the taboo that goes along rightfully with something like a nuclear weapon and promise of retaliation there, retaliation. So it's hard, and I don't think we want to step into that. That's why I was highly critical of the strikes yesterday against systems that are to counter or pick up if a ballistic weapon like that is being used. So I don't know. I believe more so, which he says, is that we are not prepared for that exchange over a country that is not within NATO. Yes, helping defend here and here. If we're not prepared to send in more modern aircraft and F-15s and F-22s and F-35s and this and that, are we prepared then to risk a nuclear strike upon somewhere and base effectively end the Western world as it is? He believes no, and I probably lean on that as well. Could we see something like that down the line? I don't know. The biggest thing, and I'm going to do a video on this specifically, the biggest thing that I fear are false flag events, because it could lead into something and extra involvement unbelievably. Anyway, legends. Sorry this one was long. I bloody promised. Anyway, look after yourselves. I hope you had a great weekend. I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.